Welcome to Create Your Vibrant Life podcast, episode 40, How to Leave a Financial Legacy, with a very special guest, Toby Mathis. Toby is one of the co-founders of Anderson Advisors, and you will hear from him what he does and what the company does. But they basically help you create a financial legacy, not only for your children or grandchildren, but for generations to come. And not only that, he has offered our listeners a very special, generous offer of getting to be a part of their membership program for free called the Infinity Investing. It's really amazing. I would highly recommend you check out the show notes for all the details. And please tag me on Instagram with all your amazing takeaways because you're going to have so many of them. Welcome to Create Your Vibrant Life podcast, where you can create the life you desire by tapping into your inner wisdom. I'm your host, Padma Ali. I'm widely known in the field of psychology as helping create long-lasting transformation. And now I'm here to help you create the life you desire using the combination of neuropsychology and ancient healing practices. This podcast is for you overachievers who are ready to unlock your highest potential so you can live the life of your dreams without the hustle. I'm here to guide you through a process of self-discovery to be the creator of your destiny. You can have that fulfilling career, that relationship, the abundance, all by taking aligned actions, simply by tapping into the power of your brain, your inner wisdom, and ancient practices. So tune in, folks. I am so delighted you're here. So welcome to Create Your Vibrant Life podcast. This is your host, Padma, and I have an amazing special guest today, Toby Mathis, and he is an attorney. I'm going to let him introduce himself, but this is all about, your mind is going to be blown by the information that Toby's going to provide us today about generational wealth, about how you can give to receive. Well, I didn't say that right. So giving, like the amazing, what comes from giving, and a lot of things about money that I didn't know before we met Toby. So thank you for being here, Toby. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself. And I'm so excited to get started.
Hey, Padma, thanks for having me on. And you said I'm an attorney, but I've been trying to make up for that fact for 20 something years. There's good ones, but they give all the bad ones a bad name, right? I'm just teasing. No, there's fantastic attorneys out there, but it comes with a lot of power and a lot of people abuse it. And so some people have a negative connotation with attorneys. And I always say, no. You know, Declaration of Independence, Bill of Rights, all these things came out of somebody had to draft it up, somebody had to do it. So like there's some really good ones and there's some bad ones too. I work on the side of the business side. So I'm not a courtroom attorney. Right. I work with businesses, and I say I'm not really an attorney. I'm more of an educator. Mm-hmm. And when we work with our clients, it's always about making sure they understand what's possible, and then they lead the show. And rather than play hide the ball, a lot of attorneys made their living off of, holding information and then charging you to receive that information. We just turned it around a little bit. And we think if everybody has the information, they'll do the right thing. And it's a much more effective relationship when you're doing that. Yeah,
that's the better way to do it. So tell us more about you. Are you the founder of Anderson Advisors? So tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I'm one of the founders. I don't know what everybody's background is, but I'll give you a little taste of mine. I grew up in Philadelphia, moved out to Seattle for 20 something years. I live in Vegas now with my wife, 2 cats. Daughter's grown and gone through college, but I got into the law because we didn't like lawyers in the business that I was working in. I had a friend's father who was very much a mentor to me. My dad worked for Boeing for 30 some odd years and just told me not to go there, not to work for anybody. He actually told me not to go to college. I had the exact opposite.
Nice.
It was pretty funny. He just said, Toby, college isn't for everybody. And luckily I could kick a soccer ball and I got a scholarship. That's the only reason I went, because I didn't apply. Somebody came and did an offer and I was like, I'll go play soccer. But my buddy's dad was a liquidator, and we went all over the country. We did trade shows. He went all over the world at the time. I ended up following in his footsteps and did a lot of things international as well. And it just kind of opens your eyes. And we had such a difficult time with attorneys in dealing with regulation. And there's all this, what you call red tape, and you hear about it and you say, what does that really mean? It just means somebody trying to stop you from doing what you can do. So if there's a transaction that makes economic sense, and you'll find that there might be some laws or rules or restrictions on certain, like shipping certain merchandise into certain countries and things like that, and just dealing with customs and all that nonsense. And the attorneys would just charge us up the charges a lot, and they didn't usually give us very good advice. And so the son, the dad, and I all went to law school. Dad made it about 6 months before he got thrown out, because he was one of those guys that would point out when somebody was hypocritical. He got asked to leave nicely. Son is a fantastic attorney in San Francisco, one of the best ERISA attorneys on the planet, as well as one of the best people on the planet. Just a really super nice guy. And I hung my shingle out on day one and ended up meeting up with Clint Coons, who I went to school with, and we decided we were going to change the way people perceived attorneys and really work with investors and start trying to get rid of a lot of the roadblocks that are there for people that are trying to grow their own wealth. Like if you remember back 20 plus years ago, the internet wasn't what it is now, and it was really hard to find information. And most people said you can't do things, unless you use a broker. You can't go into the stock market unless you have a broker. And then they would charge you $70, $80 to do a trade.
Right.
If you were lucky enough to make money on it, they would do it again and again and again, and then realize that your account's getting smaller as they're churning your account. That was the world that I walked into. Or on the real estate side, you had a lot of people who felt the only way you could make money was being kind of a slumlord and things like that. And it's like, no, there's so much you could do, so many people you can help. And it's just realizing that there was bad information, and that once you get into it, it's not what they say.
Right.
And it was eye-opening. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. What I love about what you're saying, Toby, is like you saw a need, you saw what was missing in the industry, and then you're like, nope, I'm going to make the change. And you did. What Anderson, what you guys do is like so incredible, like incredible. So can you share a little bit more about your work and what it does for the world and for people and small businesses?
Padma, what we are is the world's biggest cheerleader for businesses. There's about 300 of us here. We started off as a law firm. We have CPAs, EAs, bookkeepers, attorneys, everybody under one roof with a singular goal, which is to help you grow your estate. We say preserve, protect, and prosper. We want to help you preserve the things that you create, protect them from lawyer Snoop's Uncle Sam, and pass them on and create a legacy. Everything about us is built towards aligning ourselves with that objective with our clients. In other words, I don't want there to be a relationship where you call up an attorney and you get a bill every time you call up, so you quit calling and you start making, judgments on your own that need certain expertise, and you make mistakes, and then it costs you a lot more. And so we remove that. We have a very simple program that's a monthly program, $35 a month type thing, where they could pick up the phone call, or they could go online, ask a question, and they have a huge, a lot of information there. We just try to make it to where you're not worried about that big bill, $500 an hour that doesn't exist in our firm. What we are really built. Yeah, it's all about education.
Yeah.
And then you can make really good decisions. I'll share with you something that personally happened to me that shaped a lot of what goes on in our firm. Mm-hmm. Clint has his own experiences. He grew up, his father had apartment buildings. And so Clint grew up in that area where he was cleaning them out, managing them. His dad self-managed. And so he and his brothers did everything on those properties. I was on the other side. I was traditional business. But something that happened to me in my first year of practice was my mentor, Jerry, super, super great. It's actually his birthday today. He's passed away, but it is his birthday today. So I was thinking about him this morning. And what Jerry said is, hey, you have to have a good accountant on your team. No matter what, you got to make sure that you don't get in trouble with the tax man, and that there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. You need to have a good accountant. So I went to a CPA. I paid him $300. I still remember this to this day, because that $300 was so painful to me at the time. I actually had to save up for it. I did not have a penny. I literally hung my shingle out when I got my license. I had no money. I used to joke that I'd go to Kentucky Fried Chicken to lick other people's fingers, right? It was when you're saving up so you could pay the accountant to have an hour of their time. And he shamed me so bad. I sat in there and I listened to this gentleman basically pontificate, talk over my head, and made me feel like I was going to go to jail. And I had just opened up a practice, and I'm just like he gave me all the threats, all the stuff. If you don't do it this way, this is what happens. And, and the solution, of course, was to hire his firm to do everything. And it was going to be this exorbitant fee. And I was just like, I don't have that. And he goes, well, I'm not sure you should be in business. And you just feel ashamed. I don't know if you've ever experienced that yourself, but that sticks with you.
Oh, yeah.
And it shapes to this day. When I've written 4 books on tax, I've done the Washington, a big chunk of the Washington practice guide on contracts, things like that. And I'm always thinking of it. If I was sitting in that chair and I was the client and here's the CPA, I never want them to walk away feeling the way that gentleman made me feel that day. Although he did light a fire at me. I was like, I'm never going to be the guy that doesn't know. I'm going to research before I have the conversation next time. I'm going to find out everything so I know what's what, so I'm not going to be snowed. And what he was doing a snow job. He was pressing the fear button so that you immediately surrender and hand over your dollars in control over to that firm. I know what it is now. And I just want to make sure that our clients aren't in that scenario ever again.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can say personally, we've been working with you, Asad, and I've been working with you, with your firm. And that's the opposite experience. Customer service is so incredible.
Well, I appreciate
it. We want, even today we had a call with one of the tax people. So, yep.
Well, you know where it comes from now, right? It's like, that's what again, there's a large group here. We're a mid-sized business. By the way, Padma, we've been not only best places to work nationwide, we've been best places to work in Las Vegas, where I'm at a couple different times, but the Review Journal, I think we were number 9 this year in mid-sized companies in the state of Nevada. We take care of our folks, but we take care of our clients. We were also a firm of the future with Intuit because of the way we innovate and use their QuickBooks products, especially QuickBooks Online with our tax. And it's funny, when you take care of people, everybody's pretty happy. If that little triangle works, like you're not taking care of your employees, it gets wonky. If you're not taking care of your clients, it gets wonky. If you're not taking care of yourself, it gets all wonky. You have to make sure that you're keeping that balance, and it's not easy. And I pride ourselves in the fact that, usually we're a pretty happy ship, and people come in and they see it and they sense it. So I'm glad you are getting that too.
And it's such a simple thing, what you're saying, and it's so powerful, right? Like, just take care of yourself, take care of everybody around you, and everything is good.
It's magic, isn't it? Almost like common sense. But we're constantly inundated with the opposite. They tell us that it's all about us. Take care of yourself. Put your own mask on before you take care of your children. I'm always like, have you ever had kids? Because I don't care about me. I'm making sure that my kid's okay. All right. Like, don't tell me this. I get why they're doing it. Right. But it gets impressioned. Like, we're constantly inundated. And I would say it's stinking thinking. The old joke is, it's not my drinking that's got me stinking. It's my stinking thinking that's got me drinking. If I'm constantly getting inundated with this negativity, I'll end up being just a miserable person. And negativity could be not being aligned. And if you're just being selfish and it's all about money, you'll end up probably being rich, but more than likely you'll also be very miserable and probably unhealthy.
Yes. And there's so many different places I want to go. One is about generational wealth, and the other one is about, you're so big into giving. Like, charity work is a huge part of what you do. So I'm torn between, maybe we can talk about both.
They go together, by the way.
Tell us more.
All right. So the legacy is really easy. I always just say, think of where you'd love your family to be in 300 years, because it's going to take you out of the present completely. So I say, do the 300-year plan and start thinking about what did you create that's still here 300 years from now? because it takes you down very few roads. And, it goes like this. A lot of times we plan for our lifetime, but we don't know when our lifetime is going to end. So people say like, well, I need to plan and make sure I have enough retirement savings, but you're depleting your retirement savings. So there's an expiration date. I'm going to run out of money. Maybe it's when I'm 100. Maybe it's when I'm 85. Maybe it's when I'm 120, but I don't know what I'm going to live to. Nobody does. So you're going to be wrong no matter what. So I say, get away from your lifetime and start thinking 200-300 years into the future. And it'll change your behavior today. When I'm starting to think about, hey, what's going to happen in 200 years, 300 years, that Rolex watch becomes a pretty significant, like, oh, or if I plant that seed, let's say it's a 10,000, I don't know what Rolexes are nowadays, but let's just say it's $10,000. That's a few $1,000,000 if you leave it in the crock pot of investing long enough. It's going to be quite a bit of money in the future. All of a sudden, I'm looking at that watch a little differently. Maybe it keeps me from making poor decisions. And when you're doing that, also, it starts to force you to take a long-term look and get away from these short-term swings in the market, things like that. In the real estate market, one of the jokes is time makes you look really smart. You could make a really bad purchase, but in 10 years, you probably look pretty good. In 20 years, you look downright genius that you foresaw the market, and you're like, yeah, oops. There's plenty of us that have purchased things at the wrong time, but then over time, it doesn't really matter because you don't really care what you acquire it. You care what it's generating. And I always think of Monopoly as the greatest teacher of that. At the end of the day, I don't really care the first few times around the board, I just buy everything I can. I don't remember what I paid for it. I just know that I need to buy the little green things so I can get the little red things. And so I have money coming in, right? And we lose that. When you start looking at it and say, hey, generational wealth isn't about your name and everything else. It's about creating something that's really cool 200 to 300 years out. You all of a sudden look at this lifetime as going around the board, and all of a sudden you're not caring. It's just I'm accumulating assets. And if you take that mindset, I don't see people failing when they're taking that mindset. I see people with a lot of success when they take that mindset.
Yeah, it puts things into a very different perspective.
And it's not about giving the money to the kids. It's not about like what you start realizing. It's about creating assets that can't be taken away. And it leaves us with very few vehicles. Like in my world, it's either a trust that's going to stay in your family, an irrevocable trust that can be triggered when you pass. It's called a living trust. So it's really easy. But instead of just distributing the assets, which I see as horrifically destructive in many cases, giving somebody something that they're not prepared for is, money is pressure. If I gave you $1 million and you're not prepared for it, chances are you're going to go do a bunch of really bad decisions. And, you could just take a look at the studies on lottery winners to, the bankruptcies skyrocket after years 4 and 5 because they changed their lifestyle. They didn't know how to maintain it. So you don't want to necessarily dump something onto somebody. You want to give them a vehicle that instead of, having to carry the car, they can just get in the driver's seat and continue to drive it.
Yeah. So can you tell us more about that? That's really fascinating. That's something we learned after meeting you. It was not part of the radar. I was always okay, I'm just going to do this so that I can pass it on to the kids. But then once we met you, it was eye-opening. It was wow, this is not just about them. It's what can come after that too.
Exactly. I don't know if you're a biblical person, but sometimes they say, true wealth is the third generation, is leaving money for your kids. Yeah. Regardless of that, I say it's a good principle. There's a lot of good principles and a lot of good books. That just happens to be one that I like. Is you want to create generational wealth, and it changes the way you behave now. So if I'm looking to give money to my kids, hopefully my kids don't need it. If I raise them right, I can have a direct, I have an impact on their life. Hopefully they're not going to need it. If they do, then they should have access to it for their needs, but they shouldn't be able to go out and buy a Lamborghini with it. In other words, when I give somebody a windfall, they usually treat it differently. And the example I use with people is I don't know, Padma, if you've had kids or if you have children or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine that I gave you money for your kids. And I said, here's $1,000 for an educational fund for one of your kids. Regardless of whether I just handed you a bunch of cash, maybe I just gave you gold, right? I just handed you a gold coin. So this is for the education. You will treat that differently than if you went to a casino and you're walking through and you put a penny in, or they give you a free spin and you win $1,000.
Right.
You will treat that $1,000 that's been earmarked for something far more. You'll be careful with it, and you'll treat it with reverence, and you'll treat the money that was just a windfall with disrespect. And most people do. Some people have better self-control than others, but the stats show us that that's absolutely the case. And usually when you treat money with disrespect, it's corrosive to the rest of your life. And they end up making, you fill in the blank. Usually you accumulate a bunch of debt, you make a bunch of decisions, you feel guilty because you wasted a fortune. You've destroyed relationships, you've changed your lifestyle. If I take the money, I get $1 million and I buy a big house. Well, that big house has big utility bills and big tax payments and big repair bills. And I have to furnish it. Just putting the window coverings on a big house gives me the chills, and they don't consider that. They just bought the big house. Now they can't maintain it. A few years later, it's gone into disrepair and they're selling it at a fire sale and they're not getting much. And now they feel guilty. They've destroyed mom and dad's legacy. All that stuff you could avoid by making sure you're not putting that burden flat on them. You hold it in a vehicle. You make it for something like health, education, maintenance, and support. You put in incentives. Hey, if you graduate from college, for example, and that's something important to you, there's a bonus. If you get an advanced degree, there's a bonus. One of my favorite ones was they wanted their kids to travel, and they wanted their grandkids to travel, their great grandkids, their great great grandkids, and so they built the trust actually to allow leaving the United States. They wanted them to travel internationally for 14 days a year, and the trust would cover it. Figuring that if you saw some other cultures, you'd probably be a pretty decent human being. And they made it clear that that's what they wanted them to do. So, so if you're the beneficiary in that vehicle, guess what you have to do every year?
Yeah.
You have to go travel.
I love that. Yeah. It's pretty unique and so amazing too. Yeah.
It's not death and dying.
Yeah.
It's creating something so cool.
Yeah. And that's so incredible that you do that. How did you get the inspiration for that?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Watching the train wrecks over the first probably 10, 15 years of practice, you'd see people continuously going down this path. And it really was probably around that time that I just started really researching it more. And it wasn't an epiphany or anything. It was listening to successful people. And I had some pretty good people around me, some really successful clients. And one always said, you reap what you sow. And don't eat your seed, because if you eat your seed, all you're going to get is, turds. If you got to plant your seeds. And so they always talked about that, and it really started to resonate. And I started really thinking about it, going, you know what, that's absolutely right. If I hand all my seed to somebody who doesn't know what it is, they might eat it. If they know what it is and they know that they should be planting it, why wouldn't I just plant it and say, continue to take care of the crops? And that's when it started to click. And I just started looking more and more, and I started looking at the stats, and you realize that the die and distribute methodology that most of us follow is the poor mentality, and that the wealthiest families and the wealthiest successful legacies in this country, they didn't let their kids have it. They let their kids benefit from it, maybe for health, education, maintenance, and support, things like that, and said, hey, you're never going to be impoverished. You're never going to be without a car. You might get a Camry, but you're not going to, you don't automatically get a Lamborghini or a Rolls Royce, right? You can have a transportation if you can't afford it yourself. If you have medical issues, there's money there to help support you. If you want to go to school, there's money there for reasonable education expenses, but it's not to go and be lavish. And speaking of lavish, one of the great books, I don't know if you've ever read it. We haven't spoken about this, but Gospel of Wealth. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
So Andrew Carnegie, the Scotsman, that ended up U.S. Steel. really humble guy. And he wrote something called The Gospel of Wealth. It's a really short read. And quite often I have classes read it when I'm teaching like stewardship and stuff on the kids, is I'll say, hey, go read this. It's only like 20 pages. But there's a few things he says. One is millionaires are trustees of the poor. In other words, some people just aren't very good at making money or have restrictions. Like they have family issues that they can't make money. They have health issues that makes it very difficult for them to make a lot of money. Or they just aren't good at it. Like they just have poor judgment and they're just not, like, for whatever reason, it's sand through their hand. You know, the money just goes right through. Then there's people that no matter what they do, they seem to make it. Like look at Elon Musk. He was PayPal and now he's Tesla. He's SpaceX. He's got gosh knows how many projects, probably the second wealthiest man in the world. And he's a young guy, right? Yeah. He's going to continue to blow it up. Whatever he touches, he's making money on, right? A guy like that should make as much as humanly possible, but not be a pig about it. They need to share it. And so Carnegie, if you know his story, he started building libraries all over the United States. And what he said is a man who dies wealthy dies thus disgraced. You're supposed to be giving during your lifetime. So you're giving, and it doesn't have to be, hey, I gave to the church. How much did you give? It doesn't have to be that, you know, I gave more. You could be giving in so many different ways. What you do is you give. We all, like, I love teaching. That's the way I give. I love to do that. I love to invest in real estate. And we have two choices. I'll just tell you, like, we just had an apartment building that we're closing on. It's 160 units. It was brought to us by the United Way that we work with in a particular city because they said, you guys will still allow us to use it. Because most people, when they buy the apartments, they immediately fix it up, raise the rents. Gone are all the low income people, right? Because they want to increase the cap rate and sell it, make their millions. And we look at it from a long haul. We want to create affordable housing. We want a decent rate of return, and we have excellent properties. But I'm not looking at it as short term. I'm not going to put a whole bunch of money into it just so I could turn it and sell it to somebody. I'm going to maintain it and have cash flow coming. And so they found us that. That's part of what we do. And then now we have housing for people that would otherwise be displaced. And by the way, it's a huge issue in the United States. Just in my city here, we have 67,000 people waiting for housing under the federal voucher system. We have a ton of people there's not affordable housing. It's crazy.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is, like, with this, you are able to give in ways that might have not been possible.
You're exactly right. And I'll share with you a client call I had earlier today. It's a gal that I've been working with for years, super nice lady. And she said, hey, I don't have a ton of money, and I really would love to do some things. Like I'm a big advocate on low income housing and housing for older folks, residential assisted living, autistic housing, veterans housing. There's different areas that you can get into rather than just trying to build a whole bunch of houses for the for our millennial friends. No offense to the millennial friends, but the rents have been going up considerably, and lots of housing has been built for people that are making $75,000 a year above. Not much housing has gone in place for people that are making below that, which is a lot of our retired people, a lot of our lower income. But I'm talking to her and I said, you don't have to have the money. You have the ability to have the time and the energy and to go out there and strike the change. And so she works with a church group. I said, go find projects, go find where the crime is occurring, and then lobby your city to do something about it. Quite often the cities will promote and put the funds in place and allow a project to take place. And I said, you don't always have to do it yourself. You can just use some of your energy if you want to make change like that. And what it'll do is, if you're an investor in that area, by the way, it'll push up your property values and everything else. The rising tide, raises all vessels. It's the same in those areas. If you work in your area to try to benefit it, it does give you a benefit as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so beautiful. It's really, really beautiful. The Incan have a term called Aini, which is like the law of reciprocity, right? Like the more you give,
you just receive multifold when you give with an open heart. And that's exactly what you're saying. Like the more you give, it just comes back in different forms. I love that. The tide raises all the vessels. Beautiful. Wow.
Yeah,
Very profound.
you don't want to give until you can't take care of yourself. That's the only thing. It's like a lot of people, what do you call them? Poor and needy, rich and greedy, poor and needy. You don't want to put yourself in the poor and needy category. You don't want to be the rich and greedy. You want to be something to where, hey, I am doing well, and it gives me the ability to share. And then the more that you share and the more generous you are, it seems to me, and this isn't the reason you do it, but it just seems to me that it comes back to you.
It does.
Reap what you sow. And if you are taking care of people, I don't think you have anything to worry about. I'm a big believer in that. I don't have, like, there's not a mathematical formula for every dollar you give, you're going to get 3 back. That just tells me that you had the wrong heart. But you can do good things. Like, you don't even have to give $1 away, but you can say, you know what, I'm going to do good things with my dollars. Hey, maybe I am going to do housing in my area, residential assisted living for people so they don't have to go into a big box. And, we've seen what happens to that scenario when there's disease with this COVID thing, ran through those nursing homes, right? I don't want my mom in a nursing home. Do I want my mom living with me? Maybe. Or maybe my mom doesn't want to live with me. Maybe she wants to live with some of her friends. My dad's passed away, so maybe she wants to live with some of her friends. Well, then maybe that's time to say, hey, let's build a nice big house or rent or buy a house with lots of bedrooms where people can share it. That's called residential assisted living, and you can operate those, and they're actually pretty profitable. But you're doing a good thing.
Right, right. Yeah, and I like what you said. Like, you first take care, you make sure that you are not like in the category of like you need something, because when you need something, we can't think beyond our own needs. That's just how the humans are programmed to live.
If you're in pain, you're focusing on your own pain.
Yeah.
So you got to make sure you're healthy, you're taken care of, and you still share and you're generous. It doesn't mean you give all your money away. A lot of people get fear and they're like, "Oh, I'm not good unless it really hurts." No.
Yeah.
You don't need to be on fire. But on the same token, understand that there is the law of reciprocity. I like that. There is. If you're a selfish person, you will reap that. You will reap what you sow. If you're cajoling, if you're sneaky, all that stuff will come back on you. Just be straight up. Understand that it takes time to build wealth, and that if you do the right things consistently over time, you'll reap an absolute reward. Period. Full stop. Math doesn't lie. It will allow you to accumulate. Yeah. You plant the right seeds, you take care of them, guess what happens? They grow. Does it mean that you're not going to have drought and you're going to have elements and things that you got to protect your crops? No, that stuff's going to happen. But you plant, it's going to grow.
Right.
Do it right.
So when someone's just starting out, like, what would you recommend? Especially, I'm thinking on 2 different categories, like people who already have some wealth and they're like, okay, how do I make sure that there's legacy behind it? And then also the millennials, like you said, they inherit money, first of all, and then also they have a lot more wealth, but they're not. The other piece that you use, which is really striking, they're not respectful. When you're not respectful of money, then it leaves you, literally. So
it runs from you. It puts its track shoes on and just takes off.
So what would you recommend, like when someone's just starting, like how can they even work with you guys, or like where would they even start?
Easiest route is the free route. And we did create a link for you. I don't know, aba.link/Padma, and I'll send that to you. So
I have it. Yeah.
Oh, you do? Okay, easy. Yeah. It's free. Free access to go into something called Infinity Investing. In Infinity Investing, we'll teach you how to trade in the stock market. We're not doing crazy stuff. We are wealth builders. We are get rich slowly, statistically proven over time. So we only invest in companies that have ridiculous historical success. There's only about 60 companies that we even consider. We show you how to identify and then how to maximize, and more importantly, how to monetize those stocks, even if you're holding them passively over a long period of time. We call renting it. You can actually rent stock the same way you rent a house. Inside that same deal, you'll get that's great to get started. And if you're somebody who's more advanced, we do have an advanced group in there as well, where we bring in the real estate and the managed money and the private offerings. We do a lot of work with syndicators that bring their, very private offerings, for example, on storage units and things like that, apartment buildings, build to rent, stuff like that. We bring those and make those available just to our group. We also bring properties to our group, about 40 a month, where we work with, again, wholesalers and rehabbers, and we're looking at turnkey properties that meet our criteria. If they do, then we make those available to the folks in there too. So like you can actually learn. If you're brand spanking new, there's no reason not to come in. It's free. We make it available to you guys for absolutely no cost. You can actually trade with somebody on a weekly basis. If you want to sit in, there's an open forum where we bring in a fiduciary that trades Eric Dodd's every Wednesday. If you're somebody who loves the more aggressive stuff, he does that on Tuesdays and Thursdays with the advanced group. But on the basic side, you could absolutely get your feet wet. And it doesn't have to be expensive to get involved. Like you could literally start buying shares and get an account open and start buying it for like $25. You don't have to be super wealthy. And then you just treat it like a bill. You figure out what your income is. And I live off of 70%, take 10% and give it away. Do your giving, take 10%, pay off your debt. Take 10% and put it in the stock market. That's your first investment. And you're just doing that over time. And then we'll train you on everything else. You'll learn how to identify and locate properties for other people if you want, because we have a big group of investors and they will pay you if you can go find it. It's called wholesaling. But realistically, we take you through the steps so that you don't rush ahead, which is usually what we see. It's like usually it's a get rich quick. It's because they're teaching the stuff that is quick. It can come quick and it can go quick. Mm-hmm. And that's not appropriate for somebody who's getting started. Because if you want to quit doing something, have all your money disappear in the first month. You might be a little jaded after that. Yeah. You want to keep doing something, see the results, exactly what they said would happen in that first month, and then do it again the next month, do it again the next month, do it again the next month. And then after a few years, you're like, wow, I've accumulated something. Right. Mm-hmm. And so it's very systemized. Some would say kind of boring, but all things worthwhile, right? You just do it work on it long enough, you'll absolutely see the results.
That's incredible. And thank you for your generosity, the infinity investing. That's what it's called, right?
Yeah. And it's not, here's the beautiful part. I could be self-interested in this. In order for people to have tax issues, they need to be rich. Right. And you got to be making some money to have some tax issues. So we're going to teach you how to have some tax issues. And then we just hope that you come over and use our for-profit side when that happens. So we'll do your taxes and we'll make sure that it's adequately protected and we'll help you create that legacy. But yeah, if you want to get started and actually accumulate, you remember, reap what you sow. Think about planting seeds. We're planting seeds all the time. I'm going out and saying, I will teach anybody how to the right principles and get rid of we're brainwashed in society. Yeah. I could prove it in about 2 seconds just by saying money doesn't grow on, or it takes money to make, right? Everybody already knows the answer, and those are both wrong. So it absolutely, money grows all over the place, on trees, out of the ground, in the ether. It grows everywhere. Yeah. And it does not take money to make money. It takes your time and energy, and you could focus and you could absolutely build something really valuable. In fact, there was a great study that showed that the vast majority of millionaires made less than $100,000 a year. So it's just about doing the right thing long enough, over a long enough time horizon, you're going to get that same result and you're going to get the success.
I love that. It's so amazing. First of all, the education aspect, the more you can learn and empower yourself, the more you can make anything happen. And You're teaching that. And it's so generous of you to offer that for free. I know that's how I primarily learned about all these things, through infinity investing. I love that.
Isn't it fun? We have a really cool group too. They're a hoot. because we have a little Facebook group, and it's funny. You got your really rich folk in there. You got your airline pilots, you got your doctors and stuff, and then you have the kid, and usually the kid's eating their lunch. Like the kids get it. I had one guy that hit infinity. Infinity, by the way, just means you don't have to work anymore. Infinity means you have enough passive income coming in to where it covers your needs and wants. Like you don't have to work. If you do work, it's gravy, but you don't have to because you have passive assets that are creating wealth. So we teach you what all that means. But we had a kid. I say a kid because he was 21 years old and he'd already hit infinity, and he was kind of laughing. He was making fun of some of the richy rich guys that still weren't at infinity, but they were millionaires, right? But they still weren't at infinity. And it was like, I said to the 21-year-old, I was like, hey, just don't go backwards. As you accumulate, if you have more expenses as life goes on, you start having kids and stuff, just make sure you're accumulating more assets to help cover those things. And it's fun to watch.
Love that. Love that. So is there any other words of wisdom you have for the
only other, like I always think back to what would I say if I was 16 and I was talking to myself.
Yeah.
And the best thing is yes, you can, and yeah, just don't let anybody tell you not. The world's full of all these guys that are like little crabs walking around. Use crabs as an analogy, because if you've ever seen a crab pot, you don't have to put a lid on it because the crabs will pull each other back into the pot if they try to get out. And I think that society is a lot like that. We have a lot of people trying to pull us back in to their safety zone. And if you start doing things to free yourself from that, you expect to have a few people grab onto your foot and try to yank you back in. And don't let them pull you back in. Avoid the crabs. Just keep going. It's your life. Don't let anybody tell you can't do stuff. You absolutely can. The stats don't lie. Again, it doesn't matter whether you went to college. It doesn't matter whether you work for a big company. It doesn't matter whether you make over $100,000 a year. The odds are actually in your favor if you're not in any of those as far as achieving millionaire status. And then it's always going to be a function of how, what's your lifestyle versus how much do you need to maintain that lifestyle. And, you can increase your wealth, but if your lifestyle goes up with it, you're still in financial peril. So it's always about kind of putting a balance in test. And it, so I just remember Jerry, again, my mentor, and what he said to me, which is, yes, you can. Hey, this is what we're going to go do. And he kind of put a little fire in my belly. And then I said, hey, I can go get a job someplace else. And he goes, you'll be so much better off if you're independent. Do it early. And, and you can do it, which was, you're first starting out. I was towards the top of the class. So you're passing up a lot of money to go sit there in pain for a couple of years. But I'm so glad he gave that advice. And if he hadn't, I wouldn't be sitting here today. I wouldn't be where I am. I'd probably be in some firm billing 2,000 hours a year, pretty miserable. And so, I'll just say what he said which is, yeah, you can go out and do it.
I love that. So beautiful. And I love the analogy of the crabs too. This is something I tell my clients and my kids. Everybody goes this way, you go that way. Just don't follow the crowd. Never going to lead you to higher grounds, right?
Normally not, unless you're in a really good crowd. And it's probably not going to be a crowd. It'd be more of a small group.
Yeah.
And then go ahead and if they're going in the right direction and they're speaking wisdom, we all know, if you find yourself substituting your critical thought and you're just putting somebody else's thought in your head, you're probably going in the wrong direction. It needs to ring true for you. And then don't do things that don't.
Yeah, so true. So true. Thank you so much, Toby, for your wisdom and your thoughts. I learned something new from you today. So this is so great. This is really, I'm so glad to bring this, because I talk a lot about mindset, and I also wanted people to have some practical things that they can start to do right away. And what you provided was so mind-blowing.
Well, we'd love to have your people come in, and we take them however they may come. And there's no judgment in our group. It's all about, we're building on a long-term, and we have long-term mindsets. We're not worried about where you are. We're all looking down the path, and none of us are going to live to see it. That's the beautiful part, is you're shooting for something that's long after our lifetime. And don't let anybody ever tell you, even if you're older and you don't have a ton of money, you can still create a legacy because you still have a body, you still have your life. You can insure it and still fund things even if you pass. Don't let anybody tell you that you have to be wealthy to create these things. That would be the equivalent of the alarm company walking into your house when you order an alarm and they say, no, you shouldn't. You don't need an alarm. In fact, you should leave your doors open. Maybe someone will take away this horrible furniture. They don't do that, right? And so we don't need people judging us and telling us when it's appropriate to think and dream and create legacies. Anybody can create one. Anybody can be wealthy. And it's just about making a commitment and then doing it. And then the rest of it is just trusting a system and giving it time.
It's so amazing. Like, you're really shifting so many people's perspective on that by just sharing what you just said. It's really incredible.
I hope so.
Thank you so much, Toby.
Thanks, Padma.